The next topic we're going to discuss under the feeling and knowledge-based heading is that of the empath. Now, before we get into that, it's important to distinguish two separate words that seem very much related: empathy and empathic. Now, empathy is the ability to feel for someone else. It's very different than the psychic art that we're discussing. It's very simply the ability to wish someone else better, to feel bad that they're hurt or sad or whatever. We feel emotions, but the emotions aren't from them, they're from us to them. That's important to remember. Now, the other side, the empathic, to use empathic skill, is much more in-depth than that. In fact, what we're doing is we're actually looking at their emotions and reading them, getting information and insight into what they feel, how they're doing, what's going on in their life. Now, when we develop this skill better, some people can actually get a tremendous amount of information from this. Perfect example is if you can look at the situation and feel the emotional association to it, it allows us to read a lot of what's going through their mind. In some ways, you might even think that you're reading their mind when in fact you're just reading their emotions. Now, empathy is actually a somewhat common trait. It's not universal, but in some ways it is, and some ways it isn't. Now, what happens oftentimes is, as we said earlier, your reaction to things determines your success or failure. If you accept something, you're more willing and able to deal with it. You gain a level of control, which allows you to learn how to do things like put control into it, to be more specific in what you're doing. But more importantly, it also sometimes helps you learn how to lessen it and turn it off. Now, with some uncontrolled empaths, what happens is they'll enter places like hospitals or places where there's often a lot of pain and misery and suffering, and they'll become overwhelmed. Some will actually become physically or emotionally sick because all the other feelings in the area is too much for them to handle. That's fairly common, actually. Now, the reason this is because they haven't learned how to control it. They don't understand what it is. They don't really know what it is. So it just sort of runs in the background of its own accord. So we need to learn how to develop it better. Now, as we said earlier, we have the universal law, which says that you can't do for someone else what you first can't do for yourself. Well, emotions is a perfect example of that as well. If I don't really understand my emotions and the subtle variances and the shades of gray between them, I'm going to have a hard time reading someone else's. I'm going to misinterpret. I'm going to confuse their emotions with the emotions I think they're feeling. So this is a talent that does require a very detailed amount of trust, but it also requires a lot of self-discovery. And that's one of the reasons that there's so many uncontrolled empaths out there. They don't really understand their emotions, so they don't really understand other emotions, and they don't really know how to shut it off. So what we're going to discuss is some of the tips and tools to develop it, as well as techniques to close it down, because as I said, there's many people that have that problem. So to develop empathic ability, the easiest way is actually to go into a crowd, pick out people and start feeling their emotions, see what they feel. Again, like intuition, it's not success or failure that you're after. It's the ability to accept that you could feel these emotions, that you're getting these impressions, and that opens the doors to the ability to actually work better. So a lot of times you'll get the more common ones. The angry, the happy, the sad. But you can go more in depth and try and go deeper, look further, look more into it. And that simply requires experience. Now, you can do the same thing that I said with intuitive. You can talk to people online and try and get impressions about them. You can get a group of people together. Now, it's important in this too to remember that sometimes what people are feeling isn't what they realize they're feeling. Someone might feel sad when in fact they're actually feeling depressed. So that's where some of the subtle areas come into play. But as I said, the best way to develop it is to actually interact with people, to pick up their feelings and their emotions and their states of that nature. But to close it off, it's basically the exact opposite. What we want to do is shut ourselves off from feeling other people. That's not the same as shutting other people out. What we're doing is we're training ourselves that this doesn't matter. that even though I could receive it, I choose not to. Again, we're programming ourselves for the eventuality, not based on the actual event, but because we simply don't know. And that's the best way to develop most talents, is trust. Wait and see what happens. As we gain experience, we'll know what works and what doesn't. So that's empathy. Very simple. The next one is a talent which most people don't really know, or more appropriately don't know how to label. That's receptive. Now, a receptive doesn't just mean someone who's open and willing to receive. That's part of it, but that's not really what the talent we're discussing is about. It's more about receiving knowledge of a different kind. Now, receptivity is more about truth. It's not so much that everything that's coming in is true, it's about feeling truth. It's sort of like a lie detector without lies. It's there to give us that impression that this is real, that it's correct, that it's right. That's really what empathic ability is about. So in our life, it's very connected to most of these other talents. If we believe we can do something, that's a receptive talent that's telling us, yes, that's correct. Now, because we can confuse, and as I said, intuition can mimic, it becomes a little more complicated than that, but that's the basics of it. So to develop receptivity is very simple. Just accept what you feel. Don't worry about it, where it comes from or what it is. Just receive it, accept it, then later investigate. So if you feel someone's lying to you, accept the fact that they probably are. Don't worry about questioning it, just accept. You can question later outside, but this is about how to develop psychic talents, not everything else. So receptivity is fairly simple. It's just a bit complex because it's not as easy to find. But as I said, that's really all it's about truth. And so it's important to remember not to confuse that with truth in the sense of lie detection, that what someone's telling you is true or not true. That is included, but it's the bigger side of truth. It's more about, as I said, about correct. So receptivity helps you on your journey because it allows you to see what would work for you and what wouldn't work for you before you do it, because you know it's correct for you. That's basic receptivity. The next one we'll talk about is the ability that everyone and their dog thinks they want to have. It's the big granddaddy of them all. That's the clairsentient. Now, as we said before, clair means beyond. So this would be a talent of beyond sentience. Now, sentience itself is the ability to feel and to know. It covers pretty much the whole gambit. Now, the reason everyone thinks it's the greatest talent, because it is the most powerful. It's not the most flashy, it's not the most manipulative, but it has a whole lot of power behind it, because its first and foremost ability is that of knowledge and information. So because of that interpretation, a lot of people associate clairsentience with a lot of the feeling and knowing based abilities, although they're very distinct. A true clairsentient simply has knowledge and understanding. They sort of get to experience without experiencing, if you will. They can run things through their head and gain the experience without the physical act of experiencing it. So the equation that was said earlier, the knowledge plus experience equals understanding, a clairsentient actually gets to jump straight to understanding because they intuitively, using that talent, know more. That's what a true clairsentient is. So it seems a lot bigger and more impressive than what it really is, and because of that misinterpretation is why everyone uses that word in the wrong place. So a true clairsentience is about receiving knowledge. Now, that's important because the only way to really develop clairsentience is to develop trust. Now, as I said, intuition is part of clairsentience, and intuition can mimic. So what's happening is a clairsentient, you want to just accept that the information you have is real. And just, that's it. That's all you can do to develop the clairsentient talent, because there's nothing more you can do with it. So those are these ones. So in the next section, we'll go into a few more. As I said, there's lots of them. So stay tuned.